Hello and welcome to the command phase. My name is Mark and thank you so much for joining me. We got some pretty exciting Age of Sigmar news from Adepticon, with Spearhead getting a huge update that I'm really excited for. So in this video we're going to discuss everything we know about the upcoming Sand Bone gaming pack, alongside the Spearheads that are being released alongside it, the new Generals Handbook and Scourge of Ghyran event. So without any further ado, let's get stuck in. First up, I'm very pleased to see an expansion to the Spearhead format in the form of the Sand and Bone gaming pack, which takes us to the realm of Shyish. Inside the box you get a double-sided gaming board, 6 pieces of terrain with 2 of them having special rules which we'll talk about shortly, updated battle tactics, twist cards and a 24-page book for the battle pack, including rules for the 4 new Spearheads they'll be releasing alongside this box, which I'll go into in greater detail later on. The biggest thing to note straight off the bat is that this is an expansion to the game rather than a replacement, which means all of your current Spearheads are still going to be playable, and you now have more options of which board to play, which can only be a good thing for variety. The first big thing to note is that both sides of the board are based in the realm of death, as opposed to Fire and Jade, which had one side being Akshi and the other being Ghyran. This gives me a lot of hope going forward that they'll keep supporting this game format in the long term, which is fantastic. You'll also notice that these two sides are distinctly different from one another and previous setups too. The one side with the 5 objectives have 4 slightly smaller objectives around the edge of the board and a much larger centre objective to fight over, while the other side of the board only has 4 objectives, with 2 being very close to each other in the centre. This could well make for some vicious combat very early on in order to score highly. You'll also note that the objective markers this time around are named after the Mortarchs and Nagash, which is a really nice touch. We also get a new set of terrain which many will recognise from the Warcry Crypt and Blood starter set. We get the usual 2 big and 2 small pieces that we're used to, but there are also 2 other mystical pieces of terrain that add another dimension to these games. These are either set up on the board or brought in through a twist card. We have the Crypt of Blood here, which allows the player to take an unholy drink in the hope of powering up their unit in combat, but potentially at a cost. While the Icon of New Lamia allows you to call upon the Veiled Promises, which may or may not help you. It's nice to see a risk and reward element added into the game format, and I'll be interested to see how they play out before making a final judgment on these. But I'm very excited to give it a go. While we didn't get a whole load of information about the changes to the battle tactics, commands and twists they've put in place, they have been updated to make you feel that you're fighting in the realm of death, which was mentioned that is a very different experience to our current layouts in Fire and Jade. As I mentioned earlier, we are getting 4 brand new Spearhead boxes alongside the Sand and Bone gaming pack, with the Fusil-platoon for the Cities of Sigmar, Sun-blooded Prowlers for the Seraphon, Mortars and Elite for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and the Scrap Glut for the Ogor Mawtribes. This is very exciting to see and nice to have a big influx of new Spearheads, not only to try out in this format with different playstyles to their current boxes, but start, build upon or use to expand your desired faction for the larger game format, which is great. So diving into each further, inside the Cities of Sigmar Fusil-platoon Spearhead we get 1 Fusil Major on Ogor Warhulk, 1 Alchemite Warforger, 10 Free Guild Fusiliers and 1 Welder Corps Hunters. This brings you to a total of 530 points you can build from this box, which is pretty much the same as the existing Spearhead for the Cities of Sigmar. While in terms of value you're looking at 34%, which is pretty typical for these boxes. What I do like here is the composition of this box is completely different to the current version, with a lot more ranged firepower here to help deal with the enemy, alongside the faster moving trackers to help score objectives and battle tactics. It would make perfect sense in my eyes to grab both boxes to help build a force if you wanted to expand your army into the full game of Age of Sigmar. In terms of the Spearhead composition, we only really know that the Fusiliers will be split into 2 5-man squads. I'm unsure if they will be reinforceable, but I'd imagine one of the units in this box would be. The only war scroll that we've seen is for the Fusil Major on Ogor Warhulk, which looks pretty tough and reasonable damage output in both phases. The Mark Target's ability gives your other units +1 to hit for shooting attacks against the target he has hit, which is a perfect way to focus down a key unit, which I think is exactly what this Spearhead wants to do. I'm definitely excited to find out more about this one once the rules drop, as I can see this being a better performing Spearhead compared to their current version. Onto the Seraphon Sunblood Prowler Spearhead now, and we get one Sunblood pack, which is the Jaws of Itzel Warhammer Underworlds box, 10 Saurus Warriors, 10 Hunters of Huanchi and 3 Terror Wings from the Hunters of Huanchi Warcry box, and 1 Spawn of Kotek. This brings you between 630 and 670 points depending on the loadout for the Hunters of Huanchi. Although the Sunblood pack is currently in Legends, so that may well be something that changes in the future. As for value, it's sitting at 37%, which is a little better than their current one, although with a lot more infantry and the Underworld's box price possibly skewing it a little. For full Age of Sigmar, I could see a world of getting both to collect an army if you wanted to get more infantry and skinks into your force, but it would really depend on the style of army you were looking to build. While it's not quite as exciting model-wise with larger centerpieces and elite units in the previous box, there is a lot of good in here to flesh out a force. For Spearhead, I think it's a pretty nice box and will certainly play very differently to their current iteration, with the Kroxigors and Carnosaur being their heavy lifters. You definitely get a lot more movement in here and some ranged attacks, which brings a nice balance. Of the 2 new War Scrolls that we've seen, the Sunblood, instead of being 1 model as a leader, is actually a set of 3, making up a 9 health unit. You get some good damage output from these alongside 2 really nice abilities. Scaled Protectors allows you to ignore the first point of damage each phase and +1 to your control score, which will really help to keep this unit alive for longer, making up for the fact that it only has a 4-up armor save and no ward. Then you have Savage Bellow, which on a 3+ allows you to give a friendly unit wholly within 12 inches crit 2 hits on their weapons for the rest of the turn, which does include companion weapons, so definitely helps to give a big boost in damage output for the Spearheads. This companion keyword comes in handy with the next War Scroll we've seen in the Spawn of Kotek. This unit's 3 Sun Acolytes are just tokens to improve the control value to 4, which are removed 1 by 1 for each saving throw of a 1 you make. The ranged attack is pretty strong, if a little swingy, although if you do manage to utilise the Savage Bellow ability on this and roll a 6, I can see entire units disappearing. Definitely a unit you'd want to screen to protect its poorer armor save, and let it have a favourable charge in to deal some good damage in combat to finish off a unit. This is another Spearhead. I'll be interested to see what the rest of the rules look like before jumping to conclusions on this, but I'm excited to see how this plays out compared to the current one. Onto the Ossiarch Bonereapers now, and inside the Mortisan Elite Spearhead we get 1 Mortisan Ossifactor, 6 Necropolis Stalkers, which can also be built as Immortis Guard, and 2 Morghast Harbingers, which can also be built as Morghast Archive. This makes you between 700 and 780 points depending on which build options you go for, which is really good, coupled with a 36% discount, and it makes for a great box on paper. My first thought straight off the bat with this is thank God there is a discount box for this army that doesn't have Mortek Guard in it. I love the larger constructs for the Bonereapers, and having this many in one box, especially with the build options, makes this great value for money. It definitely complements the existing box well, and if you've got any of the older battle forces to start this force, it'll complement that too. For Spearhead, I can see this being a very tough force to take down, although their lower model count could well be a negative against them. The only War Scroll we've seen so far is the Mortisan Ossifactor, which you'll want to follow round and be protected by one of your other units to keep a slightly fragile body alive to buff them with the Refined Creations ability. Crit 2 hits until the start of your next turn for their melee weapons on bodies the size that they are, I can see being a pretty substantial damage increase for the force. We'll have to see what the rest of their rules end up like, but this one I'm pretty excited to get, partially as I love the construct models. Last of all, we have the Ogor Mawtribes and the Scrapglut Spearhead, and inside the box we get 1 Hrothgorn Mantrapper, who is part of an old Warhammer Underworlds box, 8 Iron Guts, and 1 Noblar Scrap Launcher, which can also be built as an Iron Blaster. This nets you between 760 and 800 points depending on the build options, although this alongside a 26% value is a little misleading due to the Hrothgar Mantrapper leading the unit being from an older Warhammer Underworlds box, so a little estimation in price had to be made there. Plus the fact that he's in Legends could well make this feel like less value for money to players wanting to build this army utilising this box. The other box is exceptional value for money though, and a lot more points too, so one I would recommend grabbing 2 of. Although this does give you a good option if you wanted some alternative units, especially if the leader does come out of Legends. For Spearhead it becomes a little more interesting. You get 2 units of 2 Iron Guts starting on the board with your leader and scrap launcher, while the other 4 I imagine will come in on turn 3 as one large unit. You might see a lot of models around the Mantrapper, although these are all tokens as we see on his War Scroll. They provide him with a 5-up ward save, although 1 gets removed for each successful one made, providing a nice meat shield for the character. Although once all the tokens are removed, including the sabre, you lose the companion's attacks. His hero phase ability gives it a unit more control score if successful, which really helps your smaller units of 2 take and hold objectives. The other War Scroll we've seen is the Noblar Scrap Launcher, which has some very swingy damage output with between 3 and 18 attacks, hitting on 4s with no rend, although crit also wound does help a little. The plus side is that if this unit does kill an enemy model from a unit and doesn't wipe them all out, it makes them -1 to hit for the rest of the turn, which is a nice benefit. Until we see the rest of the rules for this force, I'm unsure it'll be as strong as the current iteration, but I'd be happy to be proved wrong. Moving away from the Spearhead format now, we have the new Generals Handbook coming, which I'm sure isn't a surprise to many of you, although there are a couple of different things to come which I did want to mention. First up is that it comes inside a box with the 72-page handbook itself, updated battle plan cards, war scroll cards for the manifestations and associated spell laws, 6 objective markers which you'll notice have certain icons on that are also designated in the layout on the battle plan maps, which is something that works really well in Spearhead, so interested to see how it plays out in the full version of the game. You'll also get the new seasonal rule for the battles in Ghyran alongside the battle tactics and 12 new battle plan maps. This will include a significant change to the battle tactics as the system is now shifting to a series of sequential goals which you need to select in army composition. This definitely feels like a really big change and I'm very interested to find out more information on it later on down the line. The other major piece of news is the Scourge of Ghyran event leading up to the release of the General's Handbook. There will be daily articles on Warhammer Community with lore snippets for each faction, alongside rules for the game which will be legal for match play when the handbook goes live. These rules could be anything from new enhancement choices, regiments of renown, to entire battle formations. It was also mentioned that every army will have at least 1 war scroll updated for an existing unit. This for me is really positive. Just like 40k had for Grotmus, it breathed a bit more life into the game and opened up a lot more options to play, and this I feel will do the same for Age of Sigmar. I'm very interested to see what we get, and for players that already have their battle tome, I'm sure they'll be intrigued to what they might get as well. While no new models were shown off in this reveal, which is a little bit of a shame, I'm still really excited about these releases, especially the new Spearhead expansion. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that as soon as possible and having some more variety in my Spearhead games. I just need to stop myself from buying too many more boxes until I finish my current ones. Let me know in the comment section below what you made from the reveals for Age of Sigmar from Adepticon, and for the Spearhead fans, are you going to pick up any of the new boxes? If you enjoyed the video and want to see more, hit that like and subscribe button as it really helps the channel to grow. Thank you so much for watching the command phase, and I'll see you in the next video.